Hey boys and girls, guess what we're doing today? Yeah, I'm not thrilled about it. This is the original version of the Fall of Rome, which I apparently picked up a long time ago because it has a lot of votes on it, so it's kind of like, you know, after invasions, that got this kind of in my head, and somehow between the elections, and the concept of Fall of Rome, I ended up doing Der Fuhrer and then doing the Fall of Rome, the other game of this name, but with Rome spelled differently. And, well, just to complete this cycle, I think I gotta do this. Probably more things that I am not gonna like. Hispania comes to mind here. This is a game that I primarily picked up because of its horrible reputation. It was the game that you know, people point to and say SPI's sort of worst rules blunder, massive problems, whatever. Now, given the other games that I felt SPI did that people really harsh on, in particular Armada, which they also said it's unplayable without the errata, and there's so much of it. Yeah, I had kind of the feeling of, well, how bad can it be? Pretty bad. I'm lucky enough to have the errata, which is printed a little later, and I think this is all of it. And, well, I'm not sure how terrible. Like, I'm not sure the game would be unplayable without the errata, to tell you the truth. I think you might come up with problems like you do with invasions or something else. And it's really no worse than that, but that's pretty fucking bad. I had actually bigger problems with the rules for a couple of other reasons than trying to insert the errata and deal with it. The first one is the format it was printed in. One of these damn single sheets that's folded up. That makes life really painful. You gotta go back pretty early in S&Ts to get these news sheet copies here. And then the other is that it is a solo game, and like most solo games and a few other games, the rules are almost entirely procedural. Do this, 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 this. That doesn't give me an understanding and a comprehension of the rules that allows me to, you know, fiddle around with them much. Because of the insertion of errata and the fact that, you know, some of this errata is quite large compared to the amount of rules that there are, honestly. It's almost a rewrite of the rules that's required. And it's kind of hard to drink in what you've got from the errata and what you don't. My understanding is that there was a reprint of this done by in the Decision S&T days, and Joe Miranda worked on it. He did a few things. He changed, you know, cleaned up the rules, added some chrome to it, which is a very Miranda thing to do. And honestly, this game is pretty dry, so I think it can use it. And also, because it was the 90s, they decided to make a kind of garish map compared to this one. This one, I love this map. This map reminds me of my Great War map from Rand Gaming Associates. It's got this real simplicity to it, and maybe the American Revolution one that SPI did that I have from the same era. I mean, I just really love these kind of really, let's just cut to the chase, draw lines, and not worry about trying to show things too carefully and abstract it away. You know, so take a comparison between this and, say, Origins of World War II, which could be presented in the same kind of map, but instead they present it kind of on a roadmap. Just too busy. There's something really nice about this. It feels so simple, so clean, and such muted colors that it really pleases me. And to me, I would actually say this is like, you know, one of those maps that shows the genius of a Redmond Simonson. And I had to check to make sure he did it, because it looks very different from stuff they were doing later when they were trying to be a little bit flashier with the games. And yeah, you know, this kind of understated look fits with some of the later things. And obviously, you know, you don't have a lot of color tones. You're getting away with this with really, I think, 3 colors. And yes, you could do that in a much more garish fashion, but there's something really pleasing about this. And then, of course, the counter mix, which is kind of weird because there's kind of multi-purposing here where you put control markers on top of stacks of units to indicate whose they are. And again, if you take a look at that 90s version, it's got these horrible glossy counters that I think they added more counters. Counters became easier to put in a game or whatever. But anyway, that's the appearance. I'm kind of glad to have this for the appearance rather than for anything else. I might want like a photocopy of the later edition's rules and try to play this with that. But what do you have for counters? Well, like I say, they play a multiple usage. So you've got, from what I can tell, these B counters are for barbarians and regular troops. And that's kind of a weird thing. The N's are militia forces that are non-Roman. This is more B's. The BPs are something called raiding parties, which I actually haven't seen yet. I played about half of the first scenario in this game and stopped playing because it was completely uninteresting, and I think I kind of know enough to start playing. But yeah, that's the one thing I haven't seen. They're pretty rare, to tell you the truth. They come in, well, they come in a few places. Okay. The M's are Romanish militia. Not significantly different than the N's, but whatever. And the L's are legionary or regular Roman units. And again, there's not much to distinguish these pieces. The strengths are the same. There's a couple of places where legions don't take certain kinds of losses, and that's about it. The goal of each scenario is generally to have a certain amount of victory points at the end of the scenario as the Romans, which is to survive the calamities that are being thrown at you. And for the map, let's see, we got 2 numbers on here. The first, so areas are these little sections here. Provinces are the Roman provincial divisions, more or less. So, you know, you have Africa with 3 different areas in it. Not to use the non-Roman terminology that for some reason Invasions uses, where provinces are the individual portions of areas which somewhat, which in many cases correspond with the Roman provinces. A lot happier to see it this way. I guess there was kind of this, oh no, areas have to be bigger than provinces. Screw that. There's a reason the terminology of province aligns with something. And that may be a translation issue rather than anything else. So yeah, you have 2 numbers in each provincial boundary, and some are obviously aren't provinces. Scythia never was. Germania was never a province. The first number is the victory point value, and the second number is the number of militia in every area of that province. We'll get to some weirdness in a moment. The game covers several different scenarios which happen at different time periods, and I think there's pretty much 1 per time period, which impacts how many barbarians you get in the game. with the meat of the barbarians happening in that period that's where the height of the barbarians are showing up in invasions, and then things kind of settle down, right? And so, yeah, the Roman, and it's a one-player game, so they're the only ones who care, the Roman victory conditions are to hold on to a certain number of victory points by the end of the scenario, i.e. control areas that are worth that. And we have a sequence of play, of course, which I've copied down because of the pain in the butt of dealing with this kind of rule book. Now, my ex-wife used to, for those of you who've watched my videos for a long time, I haven't been pulling out a lot of the old games where she would have the sequence of play copied down on a separate sheet because, you know, that was a particularly useful piece of information with maybe some other notes. I did essentially that same thing here just so I could cope, because this rule book, I'm flipping through it constantly and comparing it to the errata. The sequence of play is, again, very procedural and kind of strange. So the first thing that happens is you check to see if there are internal revolts. In this scenario, yeah, there still are. Basically, you roll a die on here, and you get a yes or no as to whether or not there's an internal revolt. Now, the fact that the Barbarian creation table is right above this, and my tendency not to always read headings or whatever, I looked at it and said, oh, I only do this now. This is for a different table. When an internal revolt happens, what happens? You roll a die, and you get problems that occur in specific areas. How does that work? I don't know, because I didn't have one happen. So we flip through, and here's the other thing. You open it up and it's backwards. Plus it covers your whole map. Okay, maybe not always. So what happens with an internal revolt? If there's a yes, you roll on the table. Under each die result, numbers appear with various province names. This is the number of militia that appear in that province. And if a province is already in revolt, it can't happen again. Through most of the game, it's only Roman provinces, and now we have to look this up because I have an asterisk here to tell me. Time period G, internal revolts may occur in provinces which are not controlled by the Romans. These are hostile towards others, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And now I got to figure out how to get this someplace where it's not going to go flying off. Yeah, so you get a bunch of crap there, and in excess of the number of revolting strength points, the revolt is reduced in strength by 1 strength point. It may be completely prevented. Yeah, so if you have a garrison in place, it can prevent the internal revolt. Results in parentheses don't apply anywhere except during era G. And if for any reason the loyal Roman militia is on the map, when a revolution is rolled for that province, the existing militia turns into a revolutionary and freezes wherever that hell it is. Which is kind of interesting, because that looks like militia per province, and that is not the way that they're defined in the rules. They're defined as per area. I'm sorry. Yeah, per area within the province. They're fully capable within. And that is disturbing to me. And we'll get to that if we ever have it happen. And probably I'll curse and whatnot. Okay. Now I need this again to see. Okay, so then the next thing that happens is everything that's not the player gets to move. And it's done in order. First, any rebellions, which is if there's rebelling militia, but also if there's legions that are trying to march on Rome, which is the most likely thing in this first scenario because it starts, I think, in 67. So, you know, you're right up there against the Year of 4 Emperors coming up. And each turn is a year, I think. And then you go through a series, the Huns, the Germans. They're all mutually opposed to one another. And they all move by kind of a programmatic fashion where they calculate what's the most valuable place that I can get to, and then if there's equal valued places, they roll a die to see which one they actually head towards, and then they head off in that direction. But if they move through enemy territories, so for example, the Scythians might move through the Dacians to get towards Constantinople, if they don't notice that they're supposed to go to Tariqa instead, which happened in my game. They might get blocked by the Dacian militia, and then they have to fight their way through that. And very quickly you see that barbarians have a hard time making their way through other barbarian territories. They just kind of fail outright. Okay. I am giving you sort of a synopsis of the rules because trying to work through the rule book in this is impossible. I may be completely wrong in this synopsis because, again, piecing this into this is not trivial, but I'm trying to give you an idea of what happens, at least in my opinion. Okay, after all of the non-player pieces have moved, and again, like rebelling Roman legions will try to march on Rome and maybe get blocked in their way. They will not generate militia in Roman territories. After that happens, then each place where there's going to be a battle, wrong. As you move, battles occur. Unless it's against the Roman player. As you move, the battles occur. And we'll hit combat in a moment, but then you hit the non-loyal combat, which is when the barbarians and you can be kind of lax with this, I think, but the Romans, and although it is a purely procedural game, and maybe we'll go way off the rails if you try to modify anything at all. The non-Roman players who are invading Rome and fighting the player pieces will get their attacks in this phase. And they don't combine. Then we go to the Barbarian Creation phase, where we roll on this table. And the frequency of the number of rolls you make is based on the scenario you're in. Again, the first scenario is more about interior, the Interior Rebellion in 69 or whatever, if I remember correctly. And you'll get different kinds of forces. So what happens is you roll 2 dice, and I really should have different colored dice for this. First die roll would be there, the second die roll here, you cross-reference, and a dot means nothing happens. An L means that you have created regular units, or levies, and you use B to represent L's, or regular units. And R means that you have created a raiding party, and you use BPs for that. Now, I don't know what raiding parties do. Again, I never had any come up. But they have their own movement rules, which are slightly different. And I don't know what the difference is. I think they're not allowed to control or something. But that's just making a guess by their name. Well, we'll have to see what the difference between raiding parties and levies is. And I really don't know what it is. I mean, it's covered here that they create different units, but I don't remember there being anything that was particularly interesting about the raiding party units that was different from the regulars. If I create any, I will have to stop and look that roll up. I thought I was ready to go through this, but honestly, there is no way I'm going to hunt through that rule book. This was just such a fucking pain. So I'm going to explain what I can and not what I can't. Okay, then the player is allowed to move his own forces. Let me talk about what movement means. So this game, every unit has 5 movement points. The cost, and I didn't explain this, is actually cleverly written to move into an area, is cleverly written onto the area itself. So this is Africa, Area B costs 5 movement points. All right, so the third value there is the number of movement points it costs to enter that area. For making sea crossings, you pay the movement point cost for that sea crossing that's in the circled value. You do not pay the movement point cost of the area for that. There might be some restrictions on barbarians moving across these, but I don't think so, in which case these guys probably wouldn't have gone through Dacia either. They would have sailed here. Again, hard for me to see. It takes a while to get used to the map, and I think a fair number of mistakes are going to come from that. And then you go to the Loyalist Combat, where the Roman player gets to choose to make attacks where he wants to. So everything that the non-Roman player or that the opposing forces are doing is all kind of pre-programmed or randomly determined within that pre-programming. Which makes sense. You wouldn't want to be making decisions as the solo player in a solo design game. That feels funny. The combat results table is as such. It's a straight odds chart. If you have less than 1-to-1, you cannot attack. The non-player forces will always attack what they're supposed to attack. The Roman player has the option on whether or not to attack, whether or not if he wants to. And you have results that are different here, so they're pretty common ones. The one difference is, I believe the 1/2 DE is the special case. If Roman legions suffer that, they don't count in it. They can't take that effect, and they are not hurt by it. This is their advantage. And it gives them kind of a defensive advantage, I guess, for the fortifications that they build or whatever. I don't know. Okay, the next thing you go to is Legion Rebellion. Legion Rebellion is kind of weird. Basically, you have a die roll here based on the number of legions in an area. And there's a modifier based on the time period. So, like, it's very unlikely for legions to rebel in Era 1, but there's a special rule that handles the first turn of the Legion Rebellion, which we'll touch on when we start the scenario. Okay. The rebel units, in this case, are checked. They could do one of two things. They could either try to create their own little country, and then they stop being Roman legionaries at all, and become an independent country. And they'll be using the barbarian pieces or whatever instead of the legions. And the legions, I guess, I'm not positive of this, but I wouldn't look it up, will go on the turn record track, which is where they will go whenever they are lost. There's 2 countries that you have to worry about replacements with. That's the Roman legions, well, where there's sort of a limit of forces that are available. That's the Roman legions and the Persians. Militia kind of are too, but you don't put them on the track. So when Roman legions are killed, they're put 2 turns in advance. When Persian regulars are killed, they're put 5 turns in advance. So you can defeat Persia for a fair amount of time in battle. Okay. Then you determine what is controlled by who. And again, for the most part, the things that really care about... So, everybody cares about control. But the most important places for control are the Romans and Persians because they collect taxes based on their control. But other things, their movement is determined by, do I control this yet? They don't really get anything for controlling it, but their movement, you know, once they control an area, then they move on and attack other stuff. And the Persians are the same way. Once they control an area, they move on and attack other stuff. we should probably look at control because it's a little funky. And it's something I have to look up while I'm playing, but at least I know how to look it up. So for the Romans, they control whatever they controlled at the beginning at the beginning of the game, and nothing's in it. Or they controlled it at the beginning of the game, and there's strength equal to a third of the single largest opposing force of strength points in their province. Or, in a previous turn, they lost control of the province, and they move a number of strength points superior to the strength points of any one individual hostile force that's in it. There are no control markers, so you might find yourself having to mark control differently, because like in invasions, you kind of have to remember what the hell happened in previous turns to determine what is in control. So I may mark some stuff down where it's questioning. If they didn't originally control a province and they've eliminated all the province's militia and have strength points in the province superior to any individual hostile force in that province, then they can gain control. Now, in order to do this, let's say that's easy to determine in a single area province. But if it's, say, Germania, I have to defeat the 25 militia in every space in Germania, which I think is just about impossible. And that makes sense. Germania could not be easily conquered. Fighting 25 strength points is going to be tough for the legionary army. I think it barely is that big anyway. So you really don't want to go try to conquer Germania, which means its 6 victory points are probably out of your reach. Not only do you have to do that, but you have to have a strong enough force that any regulars that are there are not contesting your control. Okay. Yeah. So non-Roman forces control a province, and see, these both have stars in them, so we got to look at Rule 17 and see if anything's different. And this is what the game's all about, is looking these up. So, like, for some reason, the omission of Germania on the internal revolution table. Yeah. And time period G, internal revolts. Well, that's not section 7. No wonder I was confused. So here, there's a sentence I crossed out already, and a lot of words about that, which I don't know what they're talking about. Okay. And then this is having to do with what I'm about to look at. All right. So non-Romans control it when they've eliminated the militia in that in all the areas, and they have a greater than 3-to-1 strength superiority over Roman forces in the province, and they have superiority in strength points over any other hostile individual force in the province, and they have strength points at least equal to the victory point value of the province. Now, that last one, I believe, has been removed for the Persians. They do not have to observe the strength points equal to the province. Okay. Then you have Barbarian Nutrition. If the barbarians are not in their home area, half of them go away. They're sort of the short-lived attack, no matter what, which is important because when the Germans are created, for example, you might get 25 strength points. That's hard to fight. But they just come in and then they die off. Which kind of leads me to the, I'm not sure how interesting the particular scenarios are and how much they're more, oh, did I get away with like no problems in the last turn or something like that. Because it looks to me like Rome will largely right itself no matter what in any period. But again, I've only played half of the first scenario, so I don't know for sure. Then you do taxes and disbursement. Taxes are collected by provinces you control. You add up the victory point values of those provinces. That's the amount of money you get. The Romans pay $2 per per unit, per legion they have on the board. If they don't have enough cash to pay this off, they must disband units. And those count as destroyed units, I guess, going back, 2 turns later they'll be available. The Persians are similar. They count up their victory points, and that's the amount of money they create, and you can carry money over from turn to turn. And they pay $2 per unit. If you want to build new units, there's a lot of errata in this section. For the Romans, it costs them $3 per unit to build new legions. For the Persians, I believe it's $2 per unit. But the original rules said 5. And there's like different numbers in different places. I think I've got it right that it's always 2, the same as the maintenance cost, which is important because they can't maintain their starting army even. They've got 15 units that has a cost of 30. And they only have $25 worth of territory to begin with. That can go up to 27 if they gain Armenia, which is their first place to gain. But in order to have their full army paid for on the board consistently, they kind of have to take another area, which is Syria is the next area. They're programmed in order. They go for Armenia, then Syria, then Asia, I think. I don't think they go for Egypt in this game. And that's the Rome-Persia replacement phase. The Persians automatically buy what they can. The Romans have an option. The player can put what they want where they want. The Persian units are placed in Persia at random. Whenever things are done at random, it's like, well, the way they do this here is on a 1 you go to A, on a 2 you go to B, on a 3 you go to C, on a 4, 5, or 6 you re-roll. The reason that's vaguely important is here there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 areas, 5 areas in the province, so only on a 6 do you re-roll. But obviously I'm not going to re-roll on a 4, 5, or 6. As long as there's 3 or less areas, I am going to take the die as successful. There are no rules that you have to re-roll on anything but a 1 in Scythia. Okay, then the Germans are allowed. Then the Romans are allowed to bribe barbarian forces, and that's why I have these extra counters here. If there's a big pile of barbarians, if there's a pile of barbarians you can't deal with, you can just give them cash, $1 per unit, and they won't move. This is very helpful when you have 25 Germans on your border. Of course, if 25 more show up, it starts getting really hard. The income I was getting in that scenario 1 was in the 90s. I had enough units left over that, I was constantly putting away an extra money in addition to paying that $25 bribe. Obviously, though, barbarian problems can get so big that you can't deal with them easily. However, remember they will half every turn eventually. Like once you let them out of their home area. Oh, when barbarians try to move, they have a chance that they won't move as well. They just roll a die for them. And then you do the game turn record phase, you move this over, and you just keep going. And that's about it. I don't want to go too much into the procedural sides of things. I'm going to skip over, I skipped over some things because I don't know them, because I didn't run into them. I don't think they're too important. Like, obviously, I need to know them once I start playing. But, once they occur in the game. But this is basically a game where you get buffeted around by various barbarians and, you see what happens. It is totally not my kind of game. I don't know how many scenarios I'm going to play. I don't know if I'm going to make it through the first one. I suspect I will. But yeah, what the hell? There were a lot of thumbs on this, so we got to do it.